All right, welcome back to the Eric Jr. podcast. I'm Jake Klein. I'm joined here by Chris Lynch.
Yo!
We got a 3-0 series lead for our Philadelphia 76er
Yes, we
basketball
do.
team. We've got the NFL draft in less than a week. Um, the
Big time right
the
here.
country of Canada cannot currently hang,
That's right.
nor can the city of Minnesota, apparently, after that debacle the other night.
Oh my god.
Where we start tonight, my friend, is with the Toronto Raptors really not being able to do much of anything in one of the worst games I've seen from the Sixers in a long time with 24 turnovers. The Sixers are up 3-0 in this Raptors series. How you feeling?
Fantastic. I picked the Sixers to win. I wanted to pick them in five, and I feel ashamed that I didn't because for all the reasons I talked about last week, why I felt so good about the series, I talked myself into this pretty early, and they have just been thoroughly outplaying the Raptors in a lot of facets. Certainly in game one and two, there was really nothing the Raptors could point to and say, hey, we did this really well. Hey, we stopped them here. Like, it was kind of, like child's play a little bit for the Sixers. Everybody was eating. They were moving the ball like crazy, and it just is like a reminder of what could be, right? Like, man, like we felt this a little bit with the Jimmy Butler year when they started cooking, and you're just like, oh my God, look how good this team can be. That's what we're feeling right now. And then game three, you're up 2-0. You go to Toronto. They got the crowd. They got it's crazy atmosphere.
House of Horrors, that place.
Absolutely, for a lot of teams, and they cause the turnovers, and the offense is disrupted, and
Joel Embiid has a really rough first half.
really tough first half, and you're like, oh my God, all these dominoes. You know what? Chalk it up. One game, whatever. But then, second half, Joel Embiid comes back, and he proves to you, well, he's the MVP of the freaking league, man. This guy on he's got a banged up thumb. He goes out there, he scores 28 points in the second half in overtime. He hits the game winning three dagger in your eye hole
Less than
in
a second.
overtime, less than a second to get it off. Like, that's what dreams are made of, man. Like, that is watching that was cathartic.
It's an iconic moment
Absolutely.
in the profile of
And
athlete.
for Sixers fans, just like we never win that game. Like
That's exactly where I
we
need to go.
we never win that game. You turn that on 5 minutes in, you're like, don't have it tonight, right?
You're down 17. You're
Yes.
against the Toronto Raptors, the length and versatile personified.
Yes.
Okay, those traits. You somehow cut it to 10 at half. And what I was worried about, game three like that, I knew exactly what was coming, and I was ready for it. We were going to hang the whole way, and our guys are going to play over 40 minutes, and we are going to come up just short at the end. Because that's what's always happened with us, especially against Toronto, especially with teams like Boston or Miami. It always happens.
Mhm.
All right, and this time it didn't. A absolutely like stunning performance by Joel Embiid
Yes.
to have the resolve to bounce back after they really were, doing a lot of things well in the first half. And James Harden deserves a little bit of credit for steadying the tide in the first half. Obviously,
Sure.
Tyrese Maxey has played well, but for Joel to have that type of reemergence
Yes.
in the Toronto Stadium where we have so much trauma,
Yeah.
it was incredible.
Absolutely, and with Joel, his playoff games have kind of always gone one of two ways, right? Either he's cooking early and he's got the hot touch, he's hitting the little jumper, he's got it, the ball's flinging around, or it's the other one where he looks fumbled, he's messing around with the ball too long, like players are getting after him, and you can see he's visibly bothered, and that's what it was in the first half. And so what you said, the resolve, like this is a different Joel Embiid.
That's what we've been saying.
That's what we've been saying all year, and Game Three proved it.
Yes.
Game Three
It
proved
was
it.
vindicating in that regard.
Yes,
No doubt.
And if it's a different Joel Embiid, guess what? It's a different Sixers team.
Yes.
This is a Sixers team not like the other years. This is a tough hangout. Tobias Harris battling down low, like
the
this,
2 or 3 role players that you need.
Yes.
Just enough. And
Yes.
just enough of the performances from your other guys other than your top dog. When we talk about the series, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, it was an idea of the Sixers versus the Raptors and their profiles. Us versus them.
Yeah.
All the talk about how Toronto is going to give us fits. All the talk about the coaching,
Mismatch.
prowess on the other end. Exactly. Did we overrate this series going in? And is it too early to say that?
I think that there's definitely a factor of, because of the way that the Toronto won those two last regular season matchups, like, they were an easy pick as an upset, right?
Yes.
Like, and they're super well coached. They're long, like all those things. That's what made them an easy pick. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts, like the Sixers just have better players.
When it gets to the playoffs and the half court offense,
Yes.
other than Siakam, they have
Yes.
not been able to produce effectively in the half court. I mean, their 3-point shooting has been solid.
Yeah.
They just don't have the firepower. They don't have anybody that scares you to go off in a
Nope.
quarter, other than a guy hitting 4 threes. Really, there's not much else that's going to happen from any other guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you look at, the ways that Toronto could win this series, everyone started with mucking up the Sixers offense. And that just hasn't happened.
And Joel Embiid,
And
mucking
Joel
up
Embiid.
Joel in the offense.
It happened in the first half of game 3, but in game 1 and 2,
Yes.
it was open season. That offense was zooming like in the Timberwolves and Knicks game right after James Harden got
Sure.
here when we were putting up 130. Like that's what it looked like. It was basically like the Sixers were getting everywhere they wanted to be, and the players were just hitting shots. Tyrese Maxey, haven't talked about him, like taking a huge step up. Tobias Harris playing great. Like James Harden, obviously the facilitating is like a masterclass right now. He's a big part of why we're up 3-0. But I do think, it needs to be mentioned that Scotty Barnes, hasn't played since game 1. He was a big part of their offense in the regular season.
He's a rookie.
He's a rookie. He's a great rookie.
Sure, he's a great rookie, but at
He's a
this
rookie.
point, everybody's dealing with stuff right now.
Yep.
So it's not even, a very specific thing. You look around the league, guys are dealing with stuff.
I don't think it's unfair to say that. So it wasn't so much as we were overrating the Raptors, it's that we were underrating the Sixers offense.
Yes.
And the
Because-
versatility, like the differences in which we can attack a team and the different guys that we have to like create mismatches on a very consistent basis, like that's what was overlooked in the kind of like pre-series discourse.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is Toronto's offense has been okay to good, and ours has been great to tremendous.
Yes.
Outside of Game 3, really, and
the
even
first half of game 3.
and even then, you're getting great individual performances from either a Tyrese Maxey or a Joel Embiid in that half,
Yeah.
or James Harden kind of steadying the tide in the first or second quarter earlier in some of these
Yep.
games. So everybody's kind of stepping up. That's the takeaway that I have thus far.
Yeah.
We can, become a little bit more structured here. Joel Embiid, he hits that shot. We get news today that he's dealing with a possible torn ligament in his right shooting thumb.
Yeah.
So that is certainly a nick that can be played with, and played on with relative effectiveness. It's not something that's,
He came back
anything
with
in his
second-
lower body.
Yeah. It's not the lower body, which is what you want. It is the shooting hand, but as you saw, in the second half and overtime, it didn't seem to be bothering him too much. I'm sure it's painful to deal with. I'm sure it's like gonna cause some problems down the road.
Do you worry about him getting affected long term
I mean,
by re-aggravating and re-injuring this over
it
and over
doesn't
over the
seem
course
like
of the next two series?
It doesn't seem like a tremendous amount of damage is gonna be able to be done
Okay.
to it. We've seen reports that Kyle Lowry was dealing with a similar ailment on their championship run a couple years ago.
Okay.
Did not hinder him at all in the in that run up to the finals, and then in the years since doesn't seem to have reared its ugly head again. So
what you're saying is this type of injury bug, what kind of bug and what kind of sting might it be? Because it's certainly not anything that's lethal, but it's
Right.
also not nothing.
It's
So
not nothing.
It's not a bee sting, but it's also not like a spider bite.
right,
I think
it's
that's a little
something
too
we're
much.
it's something we're gonna have to monitor because this is Joel Embiid and this kind of stuff, and it's the playoffs. So like you said, everybody has this stuff popping up, right? But if there's one thing we know about Joel Embiid, like this Joel Embiid, he's going to do whatever
You're
it
gonna have to
takes.
drag him off the court.
Exactly. So it's something that the Sixers are going to monitor, and hopefully they can get a big rest between Series 1 and 2 to further kind of aid that recovery. But it's just something that he's going to have to deal with for the time being.
Right. So let's just round out kind of our big four, as we're rolling here.
Sure.
James Harden, your judgment of his performance thus far. This is a guy that the numbers look pretty solid,
Yes.
other than his shooting numbers. But he's taking enough threes, not as many catch and shoot as you would like,
Right.
and really still being very deferential on offense. But at the same time, he's averaging 10 assists a game. And
18 points.
he's manufacturing offense in the half court for us consistently, which has been a problem in the past when things get a little bit more, mucked up, as we like to say.
And as you saw in Game 3, when he left the game, the Sixers offense got kind of very predictable again.
At least those guys had continuity before James got there, though.
Of course.
In a weird way.
Yeah,
That was, an interesting component to say these guys have had these minutes together.
Right, but it was like you could tell that there was a difference maker off the floor. Like
yes.
James Harden when he's out there, he adds just another layer to that offense. It's why they brought him in. It's also why I'm like, I get people being concerned about the shooting numbers, especially in the half court at the rim, or in the in the 3-point line. But just the passing is so good, and what he does, like it's hard not to say he's not making our other players better.
He certainly is. And that's really hard to quantify and glean.
Yes.
When you're watching, unless you're really tuned in.
And then talking about it in a value perspective, how much is this worth?
It's pretty abstract.
I don't know how you do that calculus.
Do we not have a dork for that?
Yeah, we have to have something. But the simple matter is Embiid, Tobias, and Maxey are all
elevating their play
right now, and James Harden is
how much responsibility?
Kind of the steady Eddie. He's just when he's out there, you know what you're gonna get. 18 and 10 is basically what he's he's getting that every game basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just one game he's at 33 and the next game he's at 12. This is he's been very consistently this level. I would be more concerned if it was erratic.
Yes. Or more,
volatile.
Exactly. The swings between games.
Yes.
Right. If you had a big game and a really terrible game, that might worry you more than this, is what you might be saying.
That's what I'm saying. At least I know I can count on this. And in terms of Sixers point guards in the playoffs, having this as the base level of performance, I feel
you're ready to...
not great, but I feel good about it.
You feel confident enough about that boat, leaving the shore and possibly being able to survive the journey that lies ahead.
Yes.
Absolutely, I agree with you there. And if he's going to give you those numbers moving forward, you have to feel relatively confident as long as because he's going to continue to bring everybody up just a little bit with him. Yeah. And maybe occasionally, we haven't seen that breakout game. 3 playoff games, we have not seen any type of breakout game, quote unquote, from James Harden. It would be tremendous if he could do it in this game 4.
Yeah,
and really, close it out, push for it. I mean, you want to talk about, having another nice moment and really moving on from the series. I think that would be really important, but James Harden has been really great. Maxey had a huge game 2.
It's unbelievable.
Completely took over.
Yeah.
His production continues to be unsustainable and yet sustainable at the same time. Never seen anything I don't think science has ever seen anything like this, where the projection is this cannot continue and all the thing does is continue. And I would like another equivalent for that.
He not only it's just every game, it's just another step up. Of
with more confidence.
More confidence. There's more trust. There's more responsibility.
He even missed some shots in this game. Maybe you go, that's a little early in the shot clock, or there was another wide open, kick out pass. But you're okay with him taking it. Every Sixers fan is okay, and the coaches are okay, and he's okay.
Yeah. There is a movement of okay, well, he has to get more opportunities in the half court, when they're all out there.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the next step for him, but what he's doing cannot be overstated. 26 points in this series, 60% from the field, 47 from 3. The dude is just hitting threes at a crazy clip.
He's hitting deep backbreaker threes.
Yes.
He's taking you cannot come back from this threes.
Exactly. I mean, in game 2, they had that huge lead. It shrinks to 11. Who is the guy
who picks the ball up off a broken play?
Yes.
Pulls up with confidence and hits the shot that kind of separates them from the game.
That was the game. The game was
They were about to cut it to single digits.
At that point.
We just saw what happened with Minnesota and Memphis. You can blow those types of big leads. And if that was us, can you imagine the coverage and the feeling right now?
Absolutely. And I just feel, I said it before the series, Tyrese Maxey is someone who will not let that happen. He is not somebody who's going to let that happen. He's a guy you can trust in those big moments because every single opportunity he's proven it. Every single one.
If someone has basically only made whatever shot that they've taken, you'd have no other reason to believe that they're going to continue to do so.
Yes.
Now, we're going to see what transpires with other series.
Yeah.
But in this series, against a really good defensive team with a defensive coach with a really strong organizational philosophy about how they go about their business, he is dominating.
Yes.
So
he is the X factor that people fail to consider. Whether it's him taking a step, Harden making him better, it's all connected.
Yep.
And just the trust that those two like MVP caliber players, having a 21-year-old is like insane. But they both see it. They both know it. That Maxey is the guy.
Or
He's gonna get them. He's gonna help them get over the hump.
he's the key that unlocks the final door.
Yes.
If there are 3 doors to get to, each
Yes.
of them is responsible for being able to do one.
Yes.
And he's capable.
Yes.
That's what he's proven to us.
Yes.
You know, that question is no longer out there. Finally,
Absolutely.
you got to get to our guy,
We gotta mention Tobias, man.
the guy who has just really bounced back in a
Yes.
way that is rarely seen, where things usually go completely wrong once they've gone this far wrong.
Yes.
Once things have deteriorated to a really low point, there's very little room for most things to actually bounce back and for the trajectory to completely be inverted. But that's what you have here with Tobias Harris, a guy who has put it all together
Yes.
and deserves a lot of credit. And I don't know if this is the best that we're ever going to feel about him.
I mean, this is like, it's insane how good he's playing right now. And, you know, you look at the numbers and they don't jump off the page. Obviously, like, he can score more points. Like, he can be a guy who averages like 20-22, but like, that's not what we need from him right now. What we need is him to spot up in the corner, him to just load up on threes, him to do the dirty work down low in the trenches, him to show his knees to Pascal Siakam and not give an inch in that matchup. Are you kidding me? This is Tobias Harris engaged on a level that we have not seen, and it is just like so fulfilling to see a guy who struggled. You know, his struggles have been so public, you know, over his Sixers career, and like, you know, he gets blamed. You know, there's so much rightful criticism there. But when we give it to him for the criticism, like, you got to come back today and you just got to give him all the flowers in the world, because he is doing whatever it takes to win this series. And I love and appreciate that for him.
Tobias Harris is leading the series in blocks.
That's correct.
I don't know if you knew that.
That's correct. He is averaging 1.7 blocks per game. Only 3 games, small sample size alert. No other player in the series is matching him.
We mentioned that James Harden has made all the guys a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'd say now, after that very initial period
Yes.
of it being quite touch and go and very rough.
Yeah,
with
where
Tobias the
we
first
thought
couple
we thought
weeks.
we were gonna have to start George Niang.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly a thought that went through my mind.
Yes.
And obviously, there's not a lot of logical ones going on, but that one did cross my path.
Yes.
And what he's been able to do. The thing is, how sustainable is it against these better teams? I mean, it seems
That's a
like
great question.
his shots have been falling, and he's been taking them with that regularity. When, if do we see a reversion? Because at this point, you kind of lead yourself to believe that he now has the confidence that, you know, is a fraction of what Tyrese Maxey has, but still is a legitimate, like, we want you taking those shots, we need you taking those shots, and you're making those shots. And all those things coming together means that we need to continue.
Yeah, he's been great, and I think, like, I have every reason to believe that he can continue, even if the shot's not falling. Like, in Game 3, he had a really tough game, you know? He only had scored, like, 5 points. But what did he do? He didn't hang his head. He didn't force up shots. He put his head down. He doubled his effort on the glass. He doubled his effort on defense. Like, he made sure that game was going to be impacted by him in a positive way. And the Sixers do not win this game without Tobias Harris playing like he did.
So we've done a good job of properly giving him his credit.
Yes.
The other guys on the team, now that we
Yes.
round out the big four, who have all played pretty well. I think that's
Yes.
the emergent theme
Yes.
from this, is that our big four have showed up in
And
a big
that's,
way.
Like,
In a big way.
When that happens, you win most of the time.
Yes.
Like, when your top 4 players are all clicking at the same time, that is why we're so juiced about this team.
Right.
Like, that is the fuel, the fire, man.
Now, you mentioned those 4 guys.
Yes.
There's a 5th guy in that starting lineup. His name is Danny Green.
Yes.
And he's averaging 35 minutes per game in these 3 games.
That's bonkers.
A guy that we desperately are going to need
Yes.
for this to be, to have some longevity with this playoff run, because of, his being able to have turned it on the past quarter of the season. But we're going to need this guy, and he's playing 35 minutes a game.
The thing about Danny Green is, are you, like, okay with him playing that many minutes? No. Is there another option? No. There is no other option. He's not. But the thing, no. I want to give him credit, though, because it's not like he's, like, going crazy hot from 3. He's not. He's shooting below average from the field and from 3 this series. But his defense has been good. He's been in the right spots, and it's just like the veteran presence has kind of like taken over.
How about that technical foul?
I know.
Game 3. Is that the veteran presence you're talking about?
That sparked the run.
It's sparked something. Yeah, you're right. That fucking veteran presence was personified in that. You're totally right. Everybody pushing him back and him going nuts. He worked the officials a little bit, and who knows how the second half goes without it.
I mean,
butterfly effect.
I mean, obviously in Toronto, the Sixers are shorthanded on the wing. They were shorthanded like before we knew about any eligibility.
We are still shorthanded.
Yeah. Danny Green playing 35 minutes. Is it a recipe for success? No, but I think they can get away with it if because just the level of defense and just how loose he looks. Like it doesn't look like he's moving so well right now on defense. And they're not giving him any crazy assignments,
right.
But he's moving his feet. He's being in the right spot. He's chipping on the boards. Like that's what you want from your fifth starter.
The second half of the season, he did kind of start to get those extended minutes a little bit, like incrementally almost.
Yeah.
In the first half, it really wasn't. They weren't that
very stop and go. Very like he had a couple injuries. The COVID stuff obviously like played a big part.
So he has not had the normal regular season miles that maybe he's accrued in the past.
Yeah.
But obviously now we're just like hoping and pontificating. But whatever.
And then the bench has been. You want to talk about Paul Reed?
Paul Reed, as a backup center, made a play that we've never seen from a backup center for Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
Picked somebody's pocket and led to a transition easy bucket. And I've never seen that in my life.
Yeah.
And Paul Reed has had some bad fouls.
Sure.
He's had some chaotic energy.
Yep.
And he deserves to play as the backup center for the rest of the series, and then we can reevaluate
the rest
it
of the
series.
Playoffs, regardless of matchup, is where I'm at.
He's
played so well that I'm like, I mean, if he's playing poorly and you got to yank him, fine, but like, he's my default backup to Embiid.
We've talked in the past about the limited nature of this roster in terms of its athleticism.
Yes.
And Paul Reed, the word that comes to mind is the bounciness.
Yes.
Both on the defensive end, and also on offense, just the movement.
Yeah.
And on defense, the ability to switch, which a guy like James Harden, he loves to do it. So if they're out there together, and really for the rest of the team, having that quick communication, you don't have to worry. It's not a lumbering, center like you've had in Greg Monroe or DeAndre Jordan, or really to a degree, Paul Millsap's still too. Like Paul Millsap's lateral quickness alone is enough. I'm sorry, Paul Reed's lateral quickness is enough alone to warrant him playing.
Yeah, and I think in this series and in series down the line, that is just so valuable to this team. The energy that he brings and the way they've been able to manage those non-Embiid minutes.
What do you think about the strategy of playing Embiid the whole first quarter and then having Paul Reed come in? Because it's been pretty freaking successful thus far, you have to say.
It's been very successful. We've gotten the offense out to good starts in most of the games. I worry about in a tougher defensive matchup for Embiid, if 12 minutes of him banging his head against, the
Bam Adebayos
of the world. If that's not the best strategy, I wonder if Doc might like switch it up, go back to like the 8, all for 4.
I would predict that if I was going to predict it.
Yeah, or like I think it was like 10
for the last two,
first two, and then kind of the same thing in the fourth quarter as well. I'm curious about that, but right now it's working. And speaking of Doc, has not fucked up yet. He hasn't. He's really like the buttons that he's pressing have overwhelmingly been the right ones this series. Something we talked about a lot, like going into the series, him versus Nick Nurse, and how much of a mismatch that was. Doc's been playing. He's been coaching great.
I mean, to be fair, when he called the timeout in Game 3, he had to hustle to get the ref's attention, and I was screaming at the TV saying, "Call the timeout!"
Yeah.
And he may have called it, a second, 2 seconds earlier, but with that environment, with the ref so locked in, for him to have called it even 0.9, just enough time.
Yeah.
I mean, he deserves a lot. He should get a lot of credit for that. And you're right. Like, he's been solid enough. He hasn't tried to stretch the rotation beyond its, viability. He has his guys.
With honestly, and Sixers Twitter, this is one for them. Tobias Harris and Doc Rivers just like trying their hardest not to be a liability is what's getting us over the hump. Like they're just like busting their butt, making sure that they're not the reason that we lose. And with that, like we're unbeatable.
It might be enough. Could it maybe be enough?
If we're not beating ourselves, like Man, this whole thing just got busted wide open.
You're right.
Like,
You're right. That's a great place to leave it right now. I mean, we're feeling pretty good right now.
3-0, baby.
You got to think we got to close them out game 4. That's the thing.
End it.
I said the last game was the kill shot. This truly is. You want to not give them any energy going into the offseason.
You would be the first team to clinch the second round berth in the NBA playoffs. How good would that feel?
That'd feel tremendous. And get the Nick Nurse to Lakers rumors swirling, man. Just stir up all the toxicity and shit in the pot, man. Let's go. Close them out.
Yes. Okay, now switching gears a tiny bit. We do have to talk about a pretty important event, an event that we at the EJP have really reveled in, covering, and that is the NFL draft. How hype are you for the NFL draft, Jake?
Look, I've done a lot of simulations. My browser history is just filled with the mock drafts, with the simulators, with the,
player profiles,
like the YouTube, like watching 3 minutes of a guy and just making my determination. Like, I am completely out of control with this NFL draft. So, I'm glad we don't have 3 picks in the first, because that would have honestly been too much for me. Like,
too much. I agree.
Like, my work productivity certainly would have taken more of a hit than it's already taken.
Yeah, and it's already on life support.
Like, following March Madness to go into this Eagles draft where you had 3 first, it was a lot. So to only have 2 is great. We're sitting there at 15 and 18.
Yeah.
This is my mentality right now. Couple things I'm just going to throw at you. You go in whatever direction you want. I don't care. 15 and 18. I want to trade up and I want to trade back.
Yeah.
I want to do both.
Yes.
First thought.
Yes.
Okay? Second thought. I want a wide receiver and somebody from the secondary. Either corner or safety from the first round.
I know you want that. It seems unlikely. I think the Eagles are going to go defensive line, but that's a great place to start. We have 2 massive holes. Wide receiver, cornerback, safety. Right now, nobody is playing safety. We have a hole in the roster. Literally, like, Marcus Epps is going to be our starting safety.
They like Marcus Epps. They do. He played
I'm
pretty
sure
well.
I'm sure they love him.
They could certainly take like a day 3 guy. It's a matter of, are they finally going to take a top pick on a safety, or risk it with a corner when they've been burned so many times before?
Well, we haven't had a corner pick in the top, since the Sidney Jones, Raul.
Well,
Douglas
they hit on Avonte Maddox. Let's not let that slide.
I think that was in the 4th round. He's a slot corner.
Exactly. But it's still a cornerback that they hit on.
I'm saying it's been a while since we've taken a premium pick for the secondary, and it has not been a while since we've taken a premium pick for wide receiver. In fact, it happens every year. Every year we are taking a premium pick.
Sure, but
does that matter to you?
Yes, because the positional value placed on these different players has completely changed with what we've seen with the wide receiver market and where this team is at. So I think that, like, bolstering and solidifying the wide receiving core
still very important.
Brings a lot of value. Even if next year you're trying to get that quarterback, like, they're going to want a good, plethora of options offensively. Like, they're going to want some sauce. No pun intended to our boy Mr. Gardner out in Cincinnati. We're not going to get who plays defense, but I really see them, recognizing the need to add somebody, since they didn't get a high-level free agent. They didn't get Allen Robinson. They made an offer at. They didn't get anybody of note. They didn't trade for anybody. Calvin Ridley wasn't available. So
2 years ago, they struck out in free agency in the wide receiver market. They kind of shoehorned their needs onto a prospect, and they take Jalen Reagor. Everything we've heard this year is that the Eagles are not going to do that. They are focusing on best player available, which I think is the right strategy. What about you? Like, as opposed to, like, trying to, there's a few wide receivers in this class that kind of, slightly different, archetypes of wide receiver. Are you just going best player available? Are you focusing on fit? So what are some of the names that you're looking at for wide receiver? Because we both agree that that's definitely a position that is likely to be where they're looking at.
I think without a trade up, the possibility of guys that would exist there would be, Chris Olave, Treylon Burks, and Drake London. I think one of those guys is probably available to you at 15, no movement required whatsoever. A lot of that's going to depend on if a run of tackles is taken or what happens really, between like 8 and 12, with what the Seattle does, if that's a trade up for a quarterback or if they take a quarterback, a lot of, that's where a lot of important action is going to go down. But wide receivers, out of those guys, I don't love any of them. I really like Treylon Burks. I'd like to trade back and get him, but I guess you don't get too cute there. I guess you just take the guy. You got the Packers, sitting at...
Maybe you take him at 18 as opposed to 15.
Yeah, you can probably get away with that. But you can't get too cute and try to trade back and say...
Who's your overall wide receiver number 1?
Number 1, Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
Number 2, Garrett Wilson.
Okay. Those are two guys that if you can get, you try to
trade.
strike.
I do the Devontae Smith price, which is a third, to move up to get those guys. Yes, I do that. I don't do it for any of the 3 guys I mentioned before that.
Yeah.
And the only other guy that we haven't mentioned, Sky Moore and like George Pickens, I don't really have any interest in
potential second round picks.
Yes, I would not be targeting a wide receiver in the second round.
you're
If anything,
trading-
much later in the draft, maybe in the 4th or 5th. For a guy that's a specialist.
Yeah. Okay. And now let's switch gears a little bit. We'll talk about the defensive line because I think that's the other.
Most conventional wisdom would lead you to believe they're going to go that way.
I mean, and it's a pretty stacked offensive line draft right now. You got 3 guys at the top that are probably going to go in the top 5. We're looking at Aiden Hutchinson, Kevon Thibodeau, and then the riser Trayvon Walker, who's just like athletic freak. Those
wild card, man.
Yeah, those 3 guys off the edge, they're going to go in the top 5 or 6. Like the Eagles are not going to have any chance of getting those guys. Now the 2 guys that I'm watching for the fall, I'm watching to see if they fall into the 10, 12, 13 range is Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle from Georgia, who just like tested off the charts, is like crazy athletic for a defensive tackle. And then the other one is Jermaine Johnson, the edge out of Florida State. He pairs like the athletic profile with like pretty good production at the college level, 11 sacks. Like, that's a pretty good pair. Now, I don't know if those guys are going to be there. I'd love to be at 13, right? I would have loved Miami to have lost 1 or 2 more games. I'd love to be at 12 or 13 as opposed to 15 because the way this draft is shaking out.
Then you wouldn't have to have any movement.
Yeah,
and you get a guy.
Then you just see which one of these guys fall to you, right? Like, but at 15, it's such a weird spot. Like, you could trade up to 12, maybe.
Or people could be vying to trade with you really hard and angling if their quarterback is there. If Kenny Pickett has slid that far or something, who knows,
No, that's a great point.
So the volatility of possibility is, pretty violent.
That's exactly. So that's like going to be really interesting to watch. You mentioned the trade up, trade down. I think that's a very, not overly realistic, but like it is definitely a possibility because of the guys that we know the Eagles would likely be targeting in that range.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, if I throw you a couple hypotheticals, what do you think is more likely, that they trade up for the wide receiver or they trade up for cornerback? If it was going to be one of those positions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, they did the trade up for Devonta Smith last year. We know that they are, they're not afraid to trade up to get their guy. They've done it in years past.
That was a very reasonable price.
Yeah,
for 2 spots though. I mean,
I don't know.
But to jump a division rival,
I don't know if you're going to get it. Like,
might be a 3rd and a 4th or something.
Exactly. It might be a second,
which is also fine.
2nd and a 4th.
Can't do a second.
Well, you get a 4th back. Like, there's something. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to be able to do it.
You're right.
For a 3rd in this draft, but
so who are you thinking?
I would say that wide receiver is more likely, just because the value that they are seemingly putting on it.
Exactly.
We know that they chased guys in free agency and they were outpriced. Like, we know that they wanted to upgrade that position.
Or they didn't want to come here as well because of where the team was.
That's possible too. Yeah, that's possible too. With the quarterback situation, but either way, we know the Eagles are interested in wide receivers, and it's been really quiet on like the cornerback front. Like,
you're right.
When Howie's been asked about it, he's like, "Oh my God, we got all these great young cornerbacks. We want to see what happens." They got like 3 or 4 guys.
It's very like Philadelphia bullpen-esque for the Phillies, to have all these guys that can't do much.
Right, but their plan seems to be, if they don't take a high pick, which I think is likely, even though you and me, we would love to see that position, solidified, opposite cornerback.
Okay. Let's say you trade up to 10 for 2/3. Would you rather do it for Jameson Williams or Derek Stingley?
Me personally, I would rather do it for Derek Stingley because that dude just like has monster upside potential, and like if you just get another lockdown corner, that's just really enticing to me.
That's tough. Do you want the guy to pair with Devontae Smith or the guy to pair with Darius Slay?
That's a great question. I would say Darius Slay, because he's getting older. Like, he's not gonna. Devonta Smith, you have
that tutelage has value. Yeah, you're right. And
He's there. Like he ain't going anywhere.
but you're not. It doesn't. Other than Stingley
Yeah.
and Sauce is going like 2 or 3. So we need to get that out of our head. He's not sliding to 6.
No.
Detroit would never. Like that's not going to be a possibility. So we got to stop with all that.
Yeah.
So it's only Stingley, or you're quote unquote settling for either McDuffie, Andrew Booth, or Khair Lam, or someone else that you have
and those
rated
guys
a lot lower.
And those guys just don't pop off the page. They're not difference makers the way I think Stingley is. Now people disagree about him. He's had a weird
The drop off in his production after his
For sure.
freshman year
For
has
sure.
been pretty concerning.
Yeah, but just like the profile and what he did that freshman year is like enticing enough for me to do it. But I think the Eagles would rather do it for a wide receiver. I think that they value that position slightly more than a cornerback, partly because of the defensive scheme that they run. Like it's not like super heavy on the cornerbacks. They can kind of just plug in guys a little bit easier as opposed to like someone's got to be catching that ball. Like
Sure.
you can't, it's a little harder to work around that part of it.
Yeah. So
I think Jameson Williams is a great prospect though, and he is definitely my wide receiver number 1.
okay. So if I guess just to structure the conversation, I think it's very likely that they trade back at 18.
Yeah.
So what would be your one player, I guess, the one position at 15? Let's say you can't trade up.
Yeah.
But there is a run on tackles, and there's a couple different guys there that you're happy with. Who are you taking, and like why is that the position that you're evaluating the most? Let's just give examples of all of them. Let's say that Jordan Davis, Andrew Booth, and Drake London are all there.
Yeah. Okay. I would prioritize the defensive line because I think it is a little more plausible that you're getting value in the later rounds for those other positions. Whereas defensive line, I think that those guys go early and they go often.
The top tier ones.
The top tier ones go, and the second tier ones aren't anything like them. And Jordan Davis to me is a top tier, like 10-year guy who's just like you build your defensive line around.
It's a good answer.
And he's not gonna, there's questions about whether like how many snaps is he playing. We got all these
His
tackles.
role as a 3-down guy.
Like immediately, I'm not worried about that. He jumps off the page for me talent wise.
His role in the NFL is
Yes.
so easy to visualize and picture
Yes.
and to have sustainability that I agree with your logic there. If you're trading back from 18,
Yeah.
are you trading back for 18 to try to get more picks this year, or are focused on maybe trading back 20 spots, getting nothing for this year, but getting a second next year?
Yeah.
Where are your priorities in like wanting more bites at the apple this year in the mid rounds, maybe a third,
Yeah.
versus next year second or future picks?
It's a great question because we know the Eagles value next year's draft very highly based on the Saints trade, right? And everything they've talked about. But they do still have a lot of holes to fill on this roster. We talked about the wide receiver and cornerback and safety. They could. This seems to be a good draft to load up on a young pass rusher.
Some great linebacker depth.
There's some good linebacker.
We know
depth.
they're never going to take one in the first, so
But maybe in the third.
maybe in the third, maybe in the second. Fingers crossed, man. Maybe they get an extra pick. Now, if they get an extra pick, if they trade back from 18 and get an extra pick, they're taking a freaking linebacker day 2. You can book it.
Okay, man. Okay.
It's going to happen. If they can find a way to trade back from 18,
I would love that for you if it happened.
it's going to be the year that they finally do it.
I would love that for you.
They like Davian Taylor. That's great. Okay, he's not going to cut it. They're taking another guy day 2.
They do need depth at a lot of different positions. So I would say you really have to play. Like you can't sell it all for next year. Like you can't just be getting.
Move back
You
like
can't go-
25 spots and just get a second for next year.
That's tough. But I mean, if you're looking at the day 2 guys and you're like, we don't see as much of a difference between the day 2 and then the 20s
At
the
that
guys
position.
at that position.
It's all contingent on what happens at 15.
Right. If you don't take a wide receiver at 15, you take a pass rusher, and then they the guys like George Pickens and
They
Aiden
have to
Bell.
trail for it within the second round or whatever to get him.
But it's later in the draft. That's a little more malleable.
Yeah.
Than like reaching on a guy like Drake London, who I think a lot of people have very mixed emotions about him.
Man, it'll be so fascinating to see with these wide receivers because
Yeah.
there could be up to 6 or 7 in
Yeah.
the first round. So will half of them be good? Will one of
That's a
them
great
be
question.
as good as DK Metcalf or AJ Brown? Like,
Yeah.
will any of those guys be that good? It's really interesting because there seems to be so much consensus regarding there's going to be a lot taken, and yet are they worthy of those picks, or is it just a knee jerk reaction to what's happened with all these recent contracts and with what we've seen with the league?
My one like non-first round wide receiver that may end up actually going in the first round is Christian Watkins, the North Dakota State like wide receiver, who's just big and fast, and I'm just like always. I'm a sucker for those guys.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. Like it's so hard to just like separate the measurables and just be like, this is a 6'4" cornerback. Of course he's going to be good. Imagine like him going up against the bigger wide receivers against their ex. Like, my guy, since you threw a guy out there, I think Nick Benito. You're talking about defensive line. There's a big drop off and all that, man. If you could trade up in the second round and go get this guy, or you take a wide receiver at 15, trade back from 18, maybe 10, 12 spots, pick up a nice, third and fourth. And then that's where you take Nick Benito, still get your pass rusher and your defensive line depth. I think there is value to be had with defensive line. Earlier via trade up in the second, maybe trade up in the third. I think there's a little bit of depth. Then there's a huge drop off after that. So they might still be able to get a guy they really like on day 2, whereas the wide receivers, I think it's going to be a lot harder to find a wide receiver on day 2 or 3.
I don't know.
It's going to be that big of an impact. I think the separation between what you would get at 15 versus a day 2 pick is like significant.
Yeah, but for the Eagles offense, I don't think it's like a massive. We don't need like someone to get 100 targets in the season, like for the offense to function.
No, but
whereas like if we don't have a starting safety or like a starting cornerback, we're gonna that's gonna be bad. It's gonna be a problem. So and obviously this whole thing is like the Eagles are in a super interesting spot, like roster building wise. Like where do they want to like value for this year? Because they know next year they're probably going to go all in. They're probably going to either go all in on Jalen Hurts, for his last year on his rookie contract, or they're going to, try to get a veteran quarterback or trade up in the draft for a quarterback. Like, they're going to go for it in that.
They could just stockpile for next year. The more you think about it, they could be very respectable this year. Take some defensive starters, hopefully hit on them.
If you get a stud at 15 and then you just take your picks like second, third, fourth, and you just have those guys and you hit on a couple of them, then that's a very reasonable position. And the problem is if you don't hit on 15 and you've traded back and now like it's really all rough. And that's what gets people angry, Howie.
I mean, if we have to say our predictions right now, my gut is that they take a wide receiver in the first and they trade back. And then on days 2 and 3, they are targeting basically all defense. I think they want their wide receiver that's going to be a contributing, productive guy, regardless of who that is. They're taking him at 15 or they're trading back a spot or 2, whatever it is. They're getting him there, and then they're worrying about all the rest after that. And I think they're really going to try to trade back for a late pick this year and a mid-round pick next year.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable prospect because we know, how he likes to wheel and deal in this, and if he doesn't have the guys like on the board at the time, like just trade back. Don't force it.
Do you feel strongly, or do you have an inkling about what might transpire less than a week to go?
I think we're going to end up with like a middling defensive line prospect named George Karlaftis. I think that's the guy. All through this process, I'm like,
he's the guy that's still there.
He's fine.
You don't have to move to go get.
He'll fall to you.
Oh, you don't want him, man. I don't want that guy.
Who's
Ryan Kerrigan 2.0, man? Give me a fucking break.
We know the other guy he's been compared to.
Who?
Brandon Graham.
Oh my God. Give me a break. Get out of here with that.
He needs a successor, Jake.
He's a terrible way to end this, thinking that's how we're going to the most bland freaking outcome.
He is the most bland player in the first round to get.
And like he could quite easily be a very solid player.
That's what it'll be.
But I'd rather than I want Jordan Davis instead. If we're just going solid players, give me Jordan Davis. He seems more fun. I don't know.
He is more fun. He might go earlier though. He could go 8.
We'll see, man. This run on tackles is going to be massive. And quarterbacks. If 2 quarterbacks get taken in the top 10 and tackles are flying, then we are in business.
Then we're in business. If neither of those things happen, we are screwed and we should just trade both picks. Get out of the...
Just double down.
Get out of the first round.
Get 2 seconds for next year and just get like some 3rd and 4th this year and just go Los Angeles Rams and just say, we got our guys in the middle and we're going to hit on them. Don't worry about us.
That's the move. All right. This has been a very eventful pod. Do you have anything else to add?
It'd be really nice to get a sweep.
Yes.
And it'd be really nice to have a great first round of this NFL draft.
You can just hit on these guys.
Just get 2 starters.
You should be able to get 2 good players.
Yes.
In the middle rounds. So that's what we're looking forward to. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next time.